Greetings everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today for the webinar Conflict in the Workplace, the Culprit and the Solution. I'm really excited about the content today. We've just got an excellent lineup of material for you. I'm also looking forward to any interaction, so if you have any questions or comments as we're going along, please do get those up to me, and I will try to build them into the session as we go along. I'm Dwight Mahalitz. I'm President of Effective Managers. And really, I'm all about helping managers to be more effective so that they can be more successful, because more successful managers ensure that organizations are more successful. So this is one of a series of webinars where we will be delving into a specialized topic. And the specialty is something that I've seen over my years as a manager, as an executive, as the head of an organization, and as a management consultant, that there's just a lot of conflict in the organization. So the fundamental question and what we answer today is, why is there conflict in the workplace? And then just a little bit beyond that, what can you do about it when you find yourself in that situation? In terms of the approach, it's a fairly logical approach. I want to talk a little bit about the situation of most organizations and what the root causes are of conflict in the workplace. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about it from the systemic point of view. You know, what can organizations do about it? But not all of you are in the situation to put a new policy in the organization. So I'll close with some information about what you as an individual manager can do about that. So what does conflict look like in the workplace? I would hope it mostly doesn't work like that. On rare occasions, I have seen shouting matches between managers and organizations, not a very pleasant thing. But typically, it's not that drastic. Typically, conflict in the workplace looks more like this. You're sitting at your desk, you open your email, and there's a request, and it's just completely out of left field. You're saying, where the heck is that coming from? How the heck am I going to get the time to do what I need to do to be able to do that? So I'm not talking about fisticuffs in the lunchroom. Really, I'm talking about that situation where you get that gut-wrenching feeling that here's something that I need to do. My manager didn't give me a heads up about it. My manager might not even know that I'm going to have to do this. Where am I going to find the time? So it's things like finance needs some information from you, and you weren't aware of it, and of course they've got a really short deadline, or there's an HR policy that has been put in place which is going to impact on your ability to hire the kind of people that you want. Or sales is selling stuff that production can't produce, and you're in production and you're trying to figure out how to do it. So all kinds of issues and things that happen in the organization. So shortly after that, it looks something like this. So how do I deal with this situation? What is it that I need to do to be able to not only do my day job and all of those things that my manager is going to hold me account for, but how do I do the other stuff that now colleagues and peers in other part of the organization depend upon me for? And then sometimes it leads to this. I have seen situations where individuals and organizations, in spite of their desire to do very well, in spite of their capability to do very well, are just overwhelmed by the organization and the inability. I think inability is the right word. Inability of the organization to control workflow. I heard a saying once. Gosh, I should have written this down. I can't remember who said it, but the saying was that work will flow to competent people until they drown. I'm going to have to search that one out and do a blog on it. But it's true. If people are very good at their job, and you all are signed on here because you're interested in how to be more effective as managers, so I would expect you're all in that category. So if you want to do well at your job, you want to perform according to expectations, and those expectations are from your manager and from your peers. And over time, if you can't do that, you get to the point where you feel where you have to move on. And that really, really matters. 70% of employees leave a job for reasons that are related to factors that are directly controllable by their managers. So if managers are able to control these things in a way that people can use their capability and feel successful, they're more likely to stay in the organization. And then there's this data from Gallup, 50% less likely to be productive if you're ineffectively managed. 44% likely to be less profitable if you're ineffectively managed. So management is a critical aspect in terms of success in the organization. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this kind of stuff, but there's one more point that I really want to make to reinforce the importance of the managerial role in the workplace. This is it was called the service profit chain. It's sometimes called the profit chain. You may not realize that this was first published back in 1994. I think most managers have heard of this concept, and the concept is that if you have more satisfied or engaged employees, that will result in more satisfied customers, and more satisfied customers stick around longer. They buy more products and services, so therefore their lifetime value as a customer goes up, and that leads to increased revenue and profit for the organization. So when I talk to organizations and I read a lot of the writing, this is either quoted or referred to almost as the Holy Grail, and in a right way, because since 1994, that's over 20 years since this has been published, this research has been replicated in all sectors, in all types of organizations, in all cultures and regions of the world. So it absolutely holds true. But what's been missing, and this is a big flaw in the thinking in a lot of organizations, is the focus has been on the starting point of employee engagement. You know, how do we ensure that employees are as satisfied as possible? So that leads to things like you know, the foosball in the lunchroom, or different kinds of perks and benefits that are seen as a means of trying to create a more satisfied, more engaged employee. What's missing, and what hasn't been taken into account, is that when Heskett, who wrote about this originally in 1994, made a very clear point that all of this is underpinned by managerial leadership. So employee satisfaction, or employee engagement as we talk about it now, doesn't start in a vacuum, and it doesn't start from those perks and benefits. It starts from effective managerial leadership practices in the organization. So that role of the manager is critically important. So that was background. I wanted to give you that kind of setting in terms of thinking about conflict, because the role of the manager, the managerial leadership activities of the organization, has so much to do with this in so many different ways. And what I want to do is move into that next area and try to give you some insight into that. So in terms of everything I've said up until now, organizations have a sense that this is an issue. You know, if you're a CEO, you manage by walking around, you've got anecdotal evidence, you see the issues that are coming to your management table, you are in touch with your people, so you know that this is happening. But what's the typical reaction? The typical reaction in organizations is that they say, we've got to get more training in place. You know, communication's bad, we've got to train for communication. Teamwork is bad, we've got to train for teamwork. But that's usually the wrong reaction. And in the next few slides, I'm going to give you some insights into why that is exactly the wrong thing to do in most cases. Now, I'm not saying the training isn't good. Training is good, but here's why what feels intuitive may not make the best sense in the situation. So first of all, our own research from effective managers collaborating with the Telfer School of Management in 2013, we did this research to try to understand the role of managers in the workplace and why managers are so prone to spinning their wheels and not being able to focus in on their most effective work. So the starting point is how effective are managers? How much of their time do they spend on value-added work? And the survey came back, 55% of their time doing value-added work. So this is what managers are saying. So they feel that almost half of their time is spent spinning their wheels and doing stuff that really doesn't add value in terms of their role in the organization. So if managers aren't able to focus on their value-added work, and by value-added, by the way, I put the definition on this slide 15. Value-added work is work that only they, with their capability in their positions, can do. So this is a really important concept. So each position in an organization is uniquely positioned to add value to the organization overall. And it's uniquely positioned in terms of the complexity of the work that needs to be done, the capability of the individual to be able to do that work, and the resources that are assigned to that individual position to be able to do that work. So if we talk about value-added work here, there are three things that we need to think about. The first one is day-to-day work. So I call this the job description work. You know, what is it that the job description says I need to do and get out in a day-to-day basis. It's keeping your operation, whatever piece of the organization you're accountable for, running and continuously improving that. So that's the biggest chunk of a person's work. The second part is projects or change initiatives. So what are the projects that you've been assigned or other activities which are not part of your daily job description but have been delegated by your manager? So you could be the chair of a project team, you could be on a project team, you could be developing a draft policy paper, whatever it might be. So that's typically time-bound work, and it's resource intensive, but it's over a relatively short period of time. The third area, and often this one doesn't even make the list, the third area is managerial leadership. If you're a manager in an organization, you have an accountability. You're the only person, you're uniquely positioned in the organization to add value to your subordinates. So coaching them, delegating to them, setting context for them, cheering them on, leading them, all of the things that you need to do to ensure that your team is as successful as possible. So if you look at this list of three and you think of what's on your desk now and those things that you really need to deliver on, number one goes without saying, that's keeping the organization running. Number two are time bound, so you know what your deadline is for that. Number three, you recognize that's really important work, but how urgent is it? Can you put off that team meeting until tomorrow? Can you put off the performance feedback sessions until next week? Can you call someone in for that coaching session the day after tomorrow instead of tomorrow? So this is the risk, a real risk in value-added work, is that one of your most important, critically important aspects of ensuring that employees, your subordinates, are engaged can get put on the back burner through no fault of your own and through no ill will, but simply because there's a lot going on in your workday. Our research, this is part of the research that we did with the Telfer School of Management, bears this in mind. 99.4% of managers feel that they're fully capable to do their work. I love that. That's a confident workforce. Managers do feel confident, and that's a good thing. They've been, they've fought their way to that role. They've applied for that role. They've been the successful person and assigned that role, and they feel they have the capability to do the work. We asked the question then, how do you feel that you're spending an appropriate amount of time managing your subordinates? 60%, just over 60% felt that they were spending an appropriate amount of time. So managers themselves recognize this shortfall in terms of them being able to do their work. So that's just to set the scene for you in terms of managers have a lot to do. They're pulled in a lot of different directions, and as a result of that, they feel that they're not able to focus in on their most mission-critical work. And I'm making the point that a really important part of that mission-critical work is the managerial leadership, and it's not getting the kind of attention that it requires. So now I'm going to change gears a little bit and give you a different piece of data, and then I'll tie these all together in a few minutes. So if you think about work now in organizations, and as work has evolved over the last decades, we're finding that there is increased interdependence between roles in organizations. So no longer can someone be an island unto themselves. I know that's a decade, hundreds of years old saying, but even more so in organizations today, individuals cannot be successful in their work without support from other people in other roles in other parts of the organization. And the vice versa also holds true. Others in other parts of the organization can't be successful unless I provide support to them in the appropriate ways. So we have an interdependence factor in our effective manager survey, and we ask these 5 questions. And as you see, managers report at very high levels that they depend on the work of others for success. 93%, 9 out of 10 help others to do their work. 9.5, 95 out of 100 are required to collaborate on common tasks in the organization. 86%, 8 out of 10, almost 9 out of 10 feel that their performance ratings depend on collaboration with others. And then 92%, again, 9 out of 10 feel they can't be successful without close collaboration with others in the organization. So that's just, it's absolutely crystal clear that interdependence is with us, and it's with us to stay, excuse me for the alliteration there. So interdependence is with us to stay, and we're going to have to accept that. And yet, if you look at this research recently published by Sull, Homkes, and Sull in Harvard Business Review, they're talking about strategy, but this information really rings home. Only 9% of managers say they can rely on colleagues in other functions and units all the time. So only 1 in 10 of managers and employees of managers in organizations feel that they can rely on their colleagues to do what they say they're going to do. And just half say they can rely on them most of the time. So that means the other half feels they can't rely on them most of the time. When it comes to how you resolve issues, so if you're not getting the kind of support you need, or if you're not getting the input that you need for you to be able to do your work, organizations are very, very poor at resolving that. Managers report that 38% of the time the issues are resolved, but after a significant delay. So they're standing around waiting for decision making, and in this irresolvable or unresolved situation with their peer. In 14% of the cases, the organization was able to resolve the issue quickly, but they did a poor job of it. And 12% of the time, it's kind of the go-to option: do nothing, hope it'll go away. So they call that, it's just left to fester. So people have to try and work it out on themselves. So if you take this big concept, well, 3 big concepts. The number one is that managers are really, really strapped for time and resources. So they've got more on their plates than they're able to accomplish, and they're pulled in many different directions. The second one is this high interdependence in organizations amongst and across managers across the entire organization. And then this third one, that for a multitude of reasons you can't count on others to do this work. What do those 3 things add up to? I think I skipped over a slide here. Let's just go back. So it leads to role conflict. I'm just trying to, oh, I see, I had an extra slide of research. I got ahead of myself just a little bit. So our own research, I just wanted to get this in here. Sorry about that little mix-up on the slides there. So our own research. So we've seen what came out of the Salk Harvard Business Review article. I just wanted to make these points, and I'm not going to belabor them, but our research is very, very supporting of that. So this coming out of the Effective Managers survey results is that managers are continually getting themselves in this irreconcilable position. So 7 out of 10 have to work with 2 or more groups who operate differently. Half of them do things that will be accepted by one person but not accepted by someone else. I mean, how do you resolve that? 51% believe that new work processes that could be useful to the organization as a whole aren't shared. 1 in 3, only 1 in 3, so that's 2 out of 3 don't believe that work flows smoothly across the organization. They see those kinds of issues. And 4 out of 10 say that the organization has effective cross-functional accountability and frameworks. So that means 6 out of 10 are working in a vacuum in terms of cross-functional accountability and authority frameworks. So all of that together, the 3 parts that I was talking about, lead to role conflict. So that brings us to the heart of the matter. You can see why managers are in this situation, why managers feel that they're conflicted, that they're not able to get the support they need, or they're put in a position where they're not able to provide the support that they feel that they would be able to provide. But having said all that, what can you do in terms of the circumstances that lead to this conflict? Are you in a situation where you can avoid or minimize this conflict? And I would say yes, and it's a qualified yes. but there are things that you can do. So what I would like to do now is walk you through what happens in a typical organization, and what we would see as what should happen in organizations that can create these frameworks and systems and support networks for managers in organizations to be more successful and to spend less time in this non-productive role conflict situation. And then we'll roll back to a series of slides where I can get with specific guidance and advice or suggested approaches in terms of how you can deal with this as you're moving forward in the organization. So I have a couple of scenarios I'd like to talk you through on this slide, and I think it'll ring true with all of you, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these, but just to make the point. So this manager green here on the left side of the screen, let's say that manager is in sales. So there's a manager in sales, and over here in the bright blue we have a manager that's in operations or manufacturing or production, what we might want to say in that. So what typically happens in these kinds of situations is the head of sales is setting context and delegating to the director of sales in terms of what sales targets need to be. So their filter system is around, how do I increase sales? So when they're in front of a customer, of course they're going to want to increase sales to the degree that they can, and they're going to want the organization to be as responsive as they can. On the manager blue over here is in production, and manager blue is working with the filter in terms of providing highly effective, highly efficient output which meets customer needs. So absolutely, in terms of providing high quality product that meets customer needs, they're going to have a very similar filter. Where it starts to differ is the highly effective. So there may be protocols in place in terms of sizes of batch runs, changes of colors, when you make the widgets versus the tidgets or whatever it might be. But if sales is making promises in such a way that it's undermining your efficiency, there's going to be conflict in the organization. So here's the situation where two different managers, the director of sales who's giving your criteria to the manager of sales, and the director of production who's giving your criteria to the manager of production, have a slightly different filter set in terms of what they're going to be held accountable for and how they're going to be rewarded and what measures of success will be for the organization. So if it's left to fester, this kind of situation can get out of hand, where sales from their perspective are trying to increase sales and therefore be as helpful as possible to customers, and production on the other side, who feels that they're being put in a no-win situation because promises are made that they're not going to be able to keep without undermining their ability to be effective in the organization. So a slightly different perspective now in a different scenario. If we take the CEO here in red at the top of the chart, and over on the left, let's think of this person as the chief financial officer, so the head of finance. What I see happening in organizations all the time is something happens at the board level or the CEO level, and just pick something off the wall. There's an issue in some part of the organization let's pick production because they're easy to pick on. So the board is asking questions about some production overall statistics. So the CEO and the CFO sit down and they say, well, we're going to need to be able to report on this. So the CEO asks the CFO to put together a report to generate that. So the CFO goes away, works with the director of finance, and they put together a report. They figure out the data they're going to need, the data reporting, put it all together, report it to the CEO. CEO says, yep, that's it. We're going to need that every month, and we're going to really report to the board, and they're going to understand what we're happening. So the CFO goes back to the director of finance and says, okay, implement that report, and let's get the first one in for Monday. So the question is, in that scenario, when is the first time the director in operations finds out about his or her need to start gathering data in a different way and giving it to finance? Probably the first time they get an email from finance saying, here's a new report, fill it in and have it back to me tomorrow morning. So this is one of your throw your hands in the air kinds of situation. So what needs to happen really is that the CEO and the CFO in that kind of a situation, and this is a very simplistic situation, but to give the example, need to ensure the CEO, in fact, as the manager of this unit, needs to ensure that that the CFO is consulting appropriately and is taking into account what is the cost to other parts of the organization in doing this work. And if the CFO, excuse me, is consulting appropriately, then the chief operating officer is involved, is aware, understands why this is important, is setting context on the operations side to make that work. So what we're really then thinking about is how do we ensure that in organizations we're putting in place a series of context and boundaries so that there's a common understanding everywhere in the organization about how we collaborate together. So in the CFO and COO situation, there's a discussion up front in terms of a different kind of reporting system and what the implications are. In the sales and the production example, my first example, that there's a common understanding of how much flexibility sales has, how much give production should have in terms of that. These should not be left to individuals to be fighting out amongst themselves to resolve what the answer should be. There should be a common way of working. How do we work together at ABC organization in order to be able to do this work? And the process that we have in place to do this is called the effective point of accountability. And the effective point of accountability is really how do you find the single point of accountability as low as possible in the organization where someone is accountable for doing the work. For work that is delegated down the organization, that's fairly straightforward. For work that goes across the organization, that's a lot more complex to do. So I want to just spend a few minutes giving you some insight into this. So if you're in Team Green here and you have a process in Team Green and there's a problem with that process, this is the simplest scenario because the manager for Team Green is able to make decisions about changing the process and then can direct people to work in a different way. So the effective point of accountability for process Green is the manager of Team Green. But it gets more complicated. The first time you have a process that goes across two teams, here we have Team Green and Team Gold, the manager of Team Green can identify issues, can try to resolve them within Team Green, but if it impacts on Team Gold, does not have the authority to direct people on Team Gold to work differently or to change the process within their area. And similarly, the manager for Team Gold can't decide and direct on work that is in the Team Green area. So if the manager of Team Green and the manager of Team Gold can't agree on how to resolve this process, the effective point of accountability for this is the next level up. So the effective point of accountability would be Team Sage, Team Manager Sage on your screens. Now if you have a process that goes across the entire organization, who's accountable? Who's the effective point of accountability for that? Well, by definition, it's the Chief Executive Officer. And if you just think of the myriads of processes that go across the organization, your hiring policy, your compensation policy at sort of the higher level, your purchase to delivery policies and processes that you would have in place, there are a lot of these. So now I am not saying that the CEO needs to get involved with every process in the organization. You can and should have project managers much closer to the action that are accountable for the process, and they can coach and they can train and they can document issues and they can try to resolve issues and coordinate and so on. But at the end of the day, if you're having the kinds of problems that I described between sales and production, in and out and over, then there's something fundamentally wrong with the process in terms of the handovers and expectations and so on. And if the CFO or the COO or the head of sales and the head of production at that level, if the vice president levels can't agree on how we're going to set common context so that our respective subordinates can collaborate together, then the only way you're going to resolve it is for the CEO to sit down with the two of them and work it through and then make a decision. And that's fair and that's right, because from each of their perspectives, they have a different filter in terms of what success means from our department. We want to be as successful as possible. So the head of sales, of course, wants to maximize sales, and the head of production, of course, wants to maximize product in the most effective and efficient way possible. And those are not always compatible things. So when you run into that compatibility, you need to find the right balance. And the only individual that has the vision, the ability to see and decide on behalf of the entire organization is the CEO. And then just a parting shot, it can get complex, but here's the situation. If you've got one person, two different people, one in Team Gold and one in Team Blue, and they don't agree, and their managers can't agree, and their managers can't agree, at the end of the day, it really is the CEO in this situation that, again, is the effective point of accountability. And again, I stress, it's not the CEO has to be in the weeds all the time, but if something is substantive, is causing turmoil and conflict in the organization and keeps bubbling up, then there's something wrong at the policy level that really needs to be looked at. The other comment I'd make here, just before I move on to the closing slide for this section, is that 80-90% of the time this stuff works pretty well. So we all are involved in processes where we're clear about our work is, we're clear about what the handoff is, we're clear about the criteria for the handoff, and things go smoothly. But that 10 to 20% that doesn't work well can make a lot of problems in the organization. So it really does deserve the focus if those are issues that cannot be resolved. So then the closing slide for this section is that for cross-functional work, the effective point of accountability rests with the position that can decide and direct. So if you're not sure, if you're having a conflict and you can't resolve it with somebody that you're working with, the only way it can be resolved is through some kind of an escalation process, and then ultimately the effective point of accountability is the person that can decide and direct. Okay, I just want to spend a minute on this escalation process because we're going to come back to this at the end when I'm talking about things you can do to improve conflict situations. Organizations really need to have in place a formal process of escalation so that every individual in the organization understands what they need to do if there's a problem and they're not able to resolve it. And it's not because stuff isn't intuitive. You would think most managers would realize if I can't resolve this and I've got a conflict situation and I'm not going to be successful unless we can resolve it, and they can't resolve it, you need to go to your manager to work it through. But the problem is, in most organizations, the culture is more of a schoolyard culture. So managers may say, and I'm sorry to say this, but some managers do say, we hired you for a good salary. Don't bother me with this stuff. Just go and work it out. And that is not the right way to approach these things. Of course, you'll be able to work it out, but at what cost to the organization? Instead of clarifying this context for you and for all colleagues in a similar situation, if all of you are having to scramble and conflict and argue and negotiate to work something out, that is not a good use of your time and your resources. So the formal escalation process should look something like this. So if Team member Gold and Team member Blue are part of Process D and they don't agree, they talk about it, they use their absolute best efforts to try to resolve it, they try to understand what their bosses would say if their bosses were involved in it, and come out with a solution. But if they can't arrive at a solution, then they should mutually agree, we can't agree, so let's go to our respective bosses, see what they have to say. And one or the other of them might change the context. The production guy might say in the sales production example, of course that sales is incredibly important, and yes, we're going to take a hit on our effectiveness ratios for this month's production, but I know that customer needs it. It's a lead order and it's going to lead to a huge amount, and we have to satisfy them. Or might say the head of sales might say something similar on the sales side. So the two of them may work it out between them. If they can't work it out, then they should agree. We can't work it out. There's something bigger at play here. Each of our filters are so different that we're not able to do it. They have to escalate in the second level of escalation to their managers. They try to work it out, and that keeps going up the organization, assuming it's substantive, assuming that it's a major issue, and until it gets to the effective point of accountability. In this case, I've drawn it so that the effective point of accountability is the CEO. And then notice this asterisk on the side. after deciding and directing, so the CEO will make a decision as the effective point of accountability, but after that decision has been made, then it's time to go back and revisit the context and boundaries for the entire team so that they're aware of this decision, so that in future it doesn't have to get escalated back up again, because we know what the decision of the CEO was and we know which direction we're going to move in as we do that. So then this accountability and authority framework really sets the foundation for how we manage here. So how we manage in this organization, and also how we collaborate here. So it's partly about how work is delegated down the organization. I've got a whole webinar on this. It's on the YouTube, on our YouTube channel if you're interested in learning more about this. And it's all about how we collaborate here. And collaboration in the effective point of accountability, we don't have time to get into the framework, but there are three broad categories of work. So it's not just about collaboration, it's how do we collaborate, how do we have a common terminology so that we can have a language to understand how we work with each other. So it could be informing. I have the accountability and authority to inform you about stuff. I have the accountability and authority to try to persuade you to work differently about stuff. Or I have the accountability and authority to instruct you to do something in a particular way in a particular situation. And then, of course, we have all the service relationships in organization that we need to think about and ensure that those are appropriately documented. And there's common understanding on both sides in terms of both service delivery and receipt of services. So again, I've got a whole webinar on the effective point of accountability, but just to give you the highlight here is what we're really talking about is rules of the road. How do we work together in this organization? Imagine driving downtown in any size of city without rules of the road. If you didn't know what a yellow line down the middle of the road meant, if there was no common understanding of what red, green, and yellow traffic lights meant, if there's no understanding about what signal lights did and everybody did it differently, it would be chaos. There would be gridlock. And the same is true in organizations. If we make this stuff up in terms of how we work together, it's like driving without any rules of the road. We're each trying to set our own criteria, trying to work it out, trying to negotiate it, and it does become chaos in the organization as well. And that's one of the great contributors to this 45% of the time that managers spent on in areas where they're not clear about their accountability. So accountability is really important, and I can't go through any webinar without having a quick word on accountability. So I've got 3 slides on this, and then we're going to move into the closing slides, which are how you can work differently to improve your situation. So accountability is an obligation for which one can be held to account for one's results and one's actions for a specified other. And this is important because accountability isn't always clear in organizations. There's often a big mix-up between accountability and responsibility. When I was setting up Effective Managers as a company, I did reading and research for almost a whole year before we even started the research project, trying to understand accountability in organizations, and there is not a common definition for accountability in organizations. Just imagine that. Imagine if you were an engineer and there was no definition for force or for mass or for weight, or if you're a chef and there is no common definition for a cup or a teaspoon or a tablespoon or a milliliter. Imagine trying to be consistent across your profession. Same is true of managers. If we don't have common definitions for this stuff, how are we going to work together as managers? So there's 3 parts of this. The first, this sense of obligation. The second, that you can be held to account for your results and your actions. And then the third is this idea of a specified other. So the specified other in an organizational setting is my manager can hold me to account for stuff that has been delegated to me. The second point in the research that's really important is that in terms of accountability, most managers feel accountable. So I told you that 99.4% of managers feel capable. Well, almost 90% of managers feel accountable for stuff in organizations. So managers in general want to do well. On the other hand, only 7 out of 10 managers are clear about what they're accountable for. So there's this situation, a real dichotomy in organizations where managers feel accountable for doing good work, but are not clear about what it is that they're being held accountable for. And this applies both to work as it flows down the organization, but also to work as it flows across the organization. So again, this is not ill intent on manager's part. The salesperson and the purchasing person in my example are not bad people. They just disagree for different reasons. They both want to do well, but in neither situation are they clear about how they work together. So the thought I leave you with in this section is that whether or not clear accountabilities are set, managers are going to take on or feel accountable for doing good work. So the question isn't whether or not managers will feel accountable. They are going to feel accountable for doing good work. The question is whether or not they're going to feel accountable for doing the right things. And this is a really important aspect in the managerial workforce. I do have a white paper, The Effective Point of Accountability, which talks about this in more detail. I already mentioned to you that there's a webinar on this. So if you want to get more information on the accountability stuff, this one's for sale on my website, but as a webinar participant, this is available free to you. So just drop me a message. There's a very short survey at the end of this in terms of your feedback on this webinar. Sorry. So if you give me a note, please send paper. I will do that, or just drop me an email. Happy to send that along to you. So into the home stretch on this, and I am watching my questions box, and I'm not sure we're going to have much time at the end before the hour is up. So if you do have any questions, please drop them into the questions box. So what does this mean for you? So there's 4 perspectives I'd like to do, and spend a few minutes on each one of them. So based on this is a well-attended webinar, so based on the people here, there's 4 different perspectives, and I kind of assumed this going into it. So as a manager, how do you as an individual manager work differently in order to reduce conflict in your situation? Then if you're a manager of managers, so you're managing other managers, what are some of the things that you can do to reduce role conflict in yours and other areas? You may be a human resources professional, so what are some of the things as human resources, part of the human resources support function you can do? And then finally, if you're a part of the executive leadership team or the chief executive officer, what are some of the things that you can do to reduce conflict in the workplace? So as the individual, the first point is you don't have rules of road in your organization, then try to create them. So you know those individuals in different parts of the organization that you have peer relationships with. If there is a conflict situation, start with the point that neither one of you is starting from a place of wanting to do badly or wanting to succeed at the cost of the other. So this isn't a competitive situation. This is a synergistic situation. How do we find the win-win where we can work together? So a framework such as the effective point of accountability can be helpful between 2 individuals. So in terms of our relationship with each other, are we informing each other? Are we helping each other in terms of trying to persuade each other to do things differently? Or are we really in a situation where one of us has the authority to direct the other? And just having that conversation can help a lot in terms of understanding where you go forward. Now, granted, it may be a situation where the 2 of you can't agree, but at least having the conversation starts the discussion so that you can see and understand where each are coming from. Is there a lack of clarity? Then try to generate it. If there's a lack of clarity in terms of your responsibility vis-a-vis someone else in the organization, what is the handover point? What are the criteria for a successful handover? What is the quality or the quantity or the timeliness of those things that we need to provide and help others with? So sit down again with the peer and try to work out and document those things to the extent you can. Now I know every day is a busy day, and every day is a very full day, and it's hard to create that time. But imagine if you can resolve that ongoing conflict with some other individual in another part of the organization where you're not able to collaborate well, how much time that can save over the long term. So this peer-to-peer feedback loop is critical. That's one of the 5 key factors for successful managers. Actually, I call it the 5 key requirements. Again, there's a paper on the website about that. The last one is feedback loops, and one of those key feedback loops is peer-to-peer feedback. The 4th thing I'd suggest is the managing up. So if you're in this situation a lot, then there's an opportunity for your manager to help you out in terms of them understanding, perhaps at a slightly higher level, or I shouldn't say higher, that's not right, in a broader level, in a broader level, because they're accountable for you and your team, but they're also accountable for others, and work at a different peer level in the organization. So therefore may have a broader understanding of what some of the issues may be, and may be able to help you set this context, and may be able to give you information that your manager hadn't thought that was important to you, that can help you to understand why this conflict situation exists. And then the last advice I'd have, and I don't put this in a CYA kind of way, so this isn't covering up your backside kind of way, but it is to try to document and understand what this cross-functional workload is on you, particularly if you find yourself in a situation where you're needing to provide services that go outside of your business unit into other business units. So what is the cost to you in terms of time and effort? So get an understanding of this. And again, I'm not talking about a time record where you're counting minutes in terms of work you spend on this, but to get some scope of the nature of this work, because it does have an impact on stuff that's being directly delegated to you by your manager. So if you're equipped with this, when you're talking about resourcing and priority setting and delegation by your manager to you, the more informed you are about all of the work that you're required to do for the success of the organization, both within your unit, with your team, and with others, then you're going to be better equipped for your manager to understand and to help you set priorities in a way, and to performance manage you, and to give you recognition for the work that you've been doing. So that's for the individual. If you're a manager of managers, so I'm accountable for managers who are in turn accountable for their own subordinates. That's usually director level. Some larger organizations, it could be a senior manager level. So it's everything on the previous slide. So even though you're a manager of managers, maybe we'll just call it a director for ease of saying for going forward. So if you're in a director level position, you also have your own work to do. So you have your job description work which you need to do, and you may well be in peer conflict situations in other parts of the organization. In fact, at the director level, almost invariably you are, unfortunately, in today's world. So everything on the previous slide plus these follow things. In addition to using the peer network to work out what your handover points are in terms of cross-functional work, also use that peer network to provide context for your respective teams. So if you're a director in sales and you're collaborating with a director in production, just to belabor that example, sit down and work through understanding what some of those key friction points are lower in the organization between your two teams, how the two of you think you can best work together. And again, that's not going to be an easy conversation because you're probably coming from different filters, from different perspectives in terms of how you contribute to organizational performance. But again, having the discussion can do nothing but good in terms of understanding where the other person is coming from, understanding some of their challenges, sharing where you're coming from, sharing some of your challenges, and coming to some, if not mutual understanding, at least a mutual awareness of how you work together. And then agreeing to set context for your subordinate managers so that they can help their team members to understand how at least your two departments are going to work together. The next suggestion I would have for you at the director level is to implement some context clarification or continuous improvement processes within your own organization. So again, it's a peer-to-peer relationship, so neither of you has authority over each other's teams, but you have authority over your team, and your colleague has authority over her or his team. So work through what the continuous improvement escalation process might look like with respect to any issues between your two units, and then encourage this escalation of issues for significant issues. And again, this is more overcoming this telling tales out of school culture than it is asking people to be at your door every 5 minutes with trivial stuff. You want people to work hard at figuring out how to work stuff out. That is part of their job. But if they can't, using best efforts, resolve that, and it is a substantive matter, then you do want them to escalate that to you, and you would like their colleague to escalate it to his or her manager so that you can resolve it, so you can get rid of this conflict in the organization so people can get on with their work. So again, you don't have the authority to do these things, but you can make a real difference in terms of working with peer units and other parts of the organization to try to work that out. Oh, moving on to human resources professional. So I have 3 bits of advice for the human resources professional. So whether if you're a manager or a director in human resources, everything I said in the last 2 slides also applies to you. But as a human resources professional, you have a special accountability with respect to enabling better work, improvements in the workplace, and so on, helping the organization to be effective in all matters dealing with human resources. So part of your job then is to be aware of the power of an accountability and authority network or framework. I think it should be framework here, not network. But either word would work. So how could we do better with a framework, and how can we encourage the organization to implement something along those lines? So managing up would be a good way of doing that. And the managing up is recommending the creation and implementation of a framework, and the effective point of accountability is the framework that I recommend. We've developed that extensively over a long period of time and have now been implementing it successfully in organization. And the sweet spot we look for in this one, I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it occurs to me that the sweet spot that we look for is to find a framework that's not overly complex, because if you make it too complex, and boy, I've seen some complex ones out there, if you make it too complex, then it's not intuitive to the managers and you're not going to get them understanding how they relate to each other. If it's too simplistic, and I'm not going to name any names, but there are some accountability and authority frameworks out there which are too simplistic, and they cause confusion, because how do I remember if I'm accountable or responsible, and what happens if I delegate it down, then who's accountable and who's responsible, and how do we do all kinds of other things? It just gets complicated and not as helpful as it could be. So the sweet spot is to find something that is robust enough to add value so that people can have conversations about this stuff in a meaningful way, but simple enough that it feels feels intuitive. In other words, sort of, why didn't I think of this? And boy, we can work better together in this way. And then the third one that I recommend to human resources professionals is when you become aware of conflict between roles, advise and support some kind of an escalation process. So rather than the 2 individuals being at loggerheads over a long period of time, being left to fester, is one of those very early slides that I showed you today, that you encourage people to agree with each other that you will each respectively escalate this to your managers so that you can resolve this and get it put to bed once and for all. So then for the senior leadership of the organization, number 1 recommendation, recognize and implement the role of the effective point of accountability for cross-functional work. In so many organizations, when I go in, the existence of this role, the fact that the CEO needs to decide on policy and processes that go across the organization is just not well understood, and as a result, the organization flounders. Establish an accountability and authority framework or the rules of the road for your organization. This common language is so critically important in terms of people being able to collaborate and not wasting their time in unproductive work and working at loggerheads when they don't have to. Implement context and boundaries for all cross-functional work using the common terminology. So I talked about the terminology already a little bit, but this context and boundaries for cross-functional work is that as new processes or policies or systems are put in place, that the balance is maintained between all those that are involved. Those that are doing the work, those that require others to support it, and that from the vice president level on down throughout the whole organization, people have a common understanding of what this is and what their role is in it as it's implemented. And then finally, implement an escalation process and make it a requirement that if people can't agree, and it's substantive, you see my parenthetical comments always, and it's substantive, that escalation is not telling tales out of school. In fact, it's a critically important part of the work. So we do offer. I just wanted to say as we start to wind down, I've got 3 or 4 slides left here, and this is more around how you can get some additional support. One is that we have implemented the Manager Effectiveness Assessment Survey, where organizations can measure these factors in their organization. They can understand the clarity and felt accountability of their managers, their effectiveness of their managers, and many other dimensions that are part of the root cause of creating conflict in organizations. So if you'd like to know more about this and how we might be able to help your organization in terms of getting this information, please do be in touch with me. I love to talk about this stuff, and I'd love to explore how we might help you to be more effective in your organization. The last 3 slides are resources that are available to you. Most of these are free resources, because part of the mandate of effective managers is to pass on this information, is to create environments where managers can be effective and can be successful, and we really are serious about this. So if you're looking for more resources on our web page, there is a tab, resources. Some of those, a few of those resources do have some cost to them, but they're all bargain price, because we do want to make this easy for you to be able to avail yourself of information. And to a large degree, we're providing them because they're fundamental parts of our implementation framework to spread the knowledge and to help managers in things like the 5 key requirements of effective managers, the 3 fundamental capabilities to be a successful manager, and so on. So do check out our resources page. We also have a YouTube channel. We've got I think it's over 50 now different webinars that are taped. Some of them are 30 minutes long, some like this one are 60 minutes long, and they all focus in on different subjects. Here's one that you can see that was published, it's been a while since I made this slide, but the original of this slide, but it's Are Leaders and Managers Different? It's a moot point. So to me, anywhere in the organization, if you're a manager and you're accountable for people, then of course you're also a leader. And yet somehow we get this weird dichotomy in organizations that leaders and managers are different kinds of beings, when in fact that's just impossible to be. And then finally, I'd be delighted to connect with you on LinkedIn, and that automatically gets you onto my e-newsletter list. Or if you'd like to subscribe to my e-newsletter, it comes out once a month. Feel free to do that. You can register anywhere on my website. I think almost all pages have a link to that. And then finally, Twitter. I do say follow me for management tips. I say daily management tips. I must admit I'm not on Twitter every day, but I do like to get stuff up there, and I also put notices of our webinars and the major events up there as well. So that brings us to the end of this webinar, and again, I do want to thank you for your participation. It's been a delight talking about these things with you. As you exit the webinar, a short blurb will come up asking you to complete a 3-question feedback form. If you're able to do that, I would be just most grateful. I always appreciate feedback in terms of how we can improve these for managers to make them better. And if you'd like any additional information or any of the materials that I talked about during this webinar, leave me a note there or drop me an email, and I will get back to you with that. I will follow up with you by email shortly, as soon as we're going to have the recording available and posted on YouTube. I'll send that along to everyone. I stuttered there a little bit because I just have a question coming in. Can we translate this term as a responsibility matrix for the authority framework? Thank you for that question, Sarvesh. Just quickly, I think we have 1 minute left before our time is up. And I'll send you a link on some an article I wrote on this, but But I like to use the word responsibility to talk about a self-held belief. So if I'm accountable for something, I can be called to account by someone else. If I'm responsible for something, I feel responsible for doing it. So if I'm walking down the hallway in my office and I see litter on the floor, I may pick that up because I feel responsible. I have a value set that we should work in a clean environment, but I'm not held to account for that. But there's a janitorial crew that is held to account for that. So again, looking for precision in terms of accountability. So accountability is something for which I can be held to account. But the matrix, I agree completely. So not matrix in the terms of dual reporting functions. I hate that. But an accountability framework in terms of a correlation of the relationships between individuals in different parts of the organization. So if I'm informing, that's different accountability and different authority than if I'm persuading, which is different again than if I'm instructing. So each one of those informing, persuading, and instructing has two subsets under them, and each one of those has different accountabilities and authorities. So it creates a language where people have mutually agreed expectations on each other. Thank you very much for that question. Excellent question. And we are at the end. We're right now on the minute. And so I'm going to sign off now, and thank you again all very much for your participation. Look forward to running into you wherever on the internet or through our social channels, and to be able to stay in touch. Thanks again. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Hi, I'm Dwight Mahalitz, President of Effective Managers. Thank you so much for downloading the webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it and will find it useful. Feel free to check out other parts of the website for interesting downloads. Most are free, some are at a nominal charge, but I'm sure you'll find lots of interesting tools there and things that can help you be more effective. And in fact, that's what my job is. My job is to help you, help your organization be higher performing. The bottom line is that I want to start where you are, understand your problem, and provide services that can help you solve that problem and implement a solution as quickly and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Give me a call, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you, talk about your situation, and see if there's anything that we can do together. Thank you.